Шановні учасники круглого столу, розпочнемо наступну панель.
Dear colleagues, let's start the next panel dedicated to subsidies. We will talk about all urgent and acute questions which now are raised and concerning subsidies and how this influence on energy efficiency issues. My name is Naumenka. I will moderate this panel, and on the very beginning I would like to remind the participants who has not registered to please register, because we want to be with you in contact. We will conduct post-analysis research upon this roundtable discussion. So, subsidies. The topic of subsidies in many aspects is connected to psychology of people who receive these subsidies and who should be engaged to state programs of energy efficiency funding, but the matter is based on metering, commercial face the challenge of commercial metering, because people like to save something which could be measured. On the second hand, people like to save not abstract energy which they do not know how it is calculated. They like to save money. People like to save their own money, but not some abstract money which are stipulated in the budget. That is why today it is very important for the country to shift from the strategy when we assist everyone to the strategy where we engage persons subsidized as stakeholders into the programs that they have feeling of ownership. We now observe such situation today. We have a meeting at the Cabinet of Ministers on subsidies. Also, it was titled about reforms, the matter of administering subsidies by region. This was the topic of discussion. The government say we will provide many subsidies and we will think about the reform later. But the reform is critical for future energy efficiency fund in particular, because it is one of main sources of Ukrainian contribution to the fund's capital as per the concept of energy efficiency fund. So I would like to invite our participants to the stages. They are Yana Bugrimova from Ministry of Finance, Oleksiy Khabatiuk from Deputy Head of Department of Energy Efficiency from Naftogaz Ukraine, and we also plan to have a representative of the Ministry of Social Policy, but they unfortunately can't join us today. So we have three panelists. Let's start with the view of the Ministry of Finance to the system of subsidies, because this is the main state body responsible for reforming this type of governmental assistance. We are giving the floor to Yana Bugrimova, Head of Reforms Office from the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine. Good afternoon. I would like to start with denial. I don't agree that the government today address only current needs of providing the subsidies and doesn't pay attention to reforms. Just now, when we discuss monetization of subsidies, the same things are taking place in the cabinet. The Prime Minister, World Bank and Working Group of the Ministry of Regional Development, they discuss the same concept as we discuss here, that is monetization of subsidies. So what the government address this issue, what the government is thinking now about, recognizing that monetization is what we need, and it becomes obvious and it is discussed by the top leaders of the country why monetization is required and why today's scheme of settlement is bad. The first thing is savings. Current subsidies, they do not promote savings. Mathematically, the scheme as it is, when residues are returned to the budget until the latest changes, the system looks as follows. The amount of subsidy is fixed, and what you have not consumed, this will be put to your account for future. In mathematical terms, it doesn't matter whether you pay now or you will put them on advance as advance. If we take some targeted group which would get subsidies according to current model, or if the group will get subsidies in monetary form, the second group will save energy, would save much more energy, because people really has feeling that they lose what they have. So firing gas or consuming heat, they do not have feeling of loss because they do not have it in monetary form. Anti-communication campaign also had a role. So people who use subsidies, their consumption is higher. This is behavioral model. People didn't feel that they save their own money. That is why the second, why it is important to monetize subsidies. We have also the other topic to open gas market when we have paying of subsidies. We are clearing settlements in which only Naftogaz of Ukraine is the only player. In the country where more than 50% of population gets subsidy and he can't play on equal terms. The third thing, the clearance system is in Ukraine is bad in principle. The government tries to structure it, but any clearing results in abuses. So how the system should be changed? We don't have consensus on this issue. We can't say we have very harsh debates, but there are two models. The Minister of Finance told that the Minister of Social Policy was against monetization. They didn't support it in that understanding which they used to have. The first is monetization at the level of TKE. This is the cancellation of Regulation 20.
а теплокоммунальным предприятиям, но выплачивает ее деньгами.
The subsidies are paid in money to take a year. This is the first model. The second model is monetization at the level of household. This is in the sense that the household, they receive money, and further there are several sub-models.
Во второй модели тоже есть подварианты, и они тоже сейчас все обсуждаются.
So not district heating companies should receive this money. What is monetized? Only residues are monetized. The difference between actual consumption and subsidies amount, these residues, they are paid in money to households. So the households, they further send this money to pay for further their consumption of energy. The model could be whatever we monetize, the residues of the total amount. The right of households may be restricted or not restricted by targeted use. The household, if it has restrictions imposed, they can say that they can pay for housing and communal utilities services, and they can use them for energy efficiency measures. So they are restricted to two targets. Today, there is no final decision which way we will go. The government plans by the end of this heating season to have in full the model for monetization and to take relevant acts which are needed for this monetization. What would be the criteria to make choice? My personal opinion is that first of all, these scenarios and sub-scenarios, they should be assessed by the following criteria. How this scenario complies with our goal to launch incentives for households to save energy. The second is in the conditions when we do not have fines imposed for delayed payment of communal utilities bills, when our population cannot pay in time for their consumption. This then easy implementation, and the last scenario is the last criteria is the implementation. My opinion is I would if my opinion is important, I would do it the following way. We do not know how a person would behave. We can just pay money to credit cards of people. I don't know how the person will behave if the person will get money. If they get money, they can stop paying at all. So I am afraid to risk so much. As for me, the obvious thing is to cancel Resolution 20. This means to return to ordinary way of settlements between district heating companies and households. Then also the step should be to prepare technical decision, what instrument to use, what credit cards to open for individuals. The next question is to give people the residues or not. We should start with this. If we monetize residues, this would prevent non-payments. On the next stage, we can reach monetization of the full amount of subsidies. I think this process is not fast, and it would be good if we complete the first stage monetization at the level of district heating companies in 2017, and in 2018 we can complete the next stage, which is monetization for individuals, for households. What should we do now to make it possible? Today we should launch monitoring of actual consumption. I remember the problem of last year. I was for the residues via changing Resolution 20 to return them to people, but it was 15 billion of money. I think this means either our consumption standards are not well grounded, or it is a manipulation to set well grounded consumption standards. We need statistics, but we have it, but it is not systematized. We need monitoring today. It would allow us to set adequate norms, and adequate norms will help us to shift to monetization. The second is unpopular thing. If there is no financial responsibility for non-payments, it would not work. So final consumers should be a liability for non-payment in time. Thank you, Yana, for a very in-deep, very detailed presentation of the Ministry of Finance next steps. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Khabatiuk from Naftogaz of Ukraine. I would like to dispel a myth, just like Yana did. I will start also from denial. The first, clearing is not good. We are for that to shift from it, to abandon it in future. But the question is, let's look why gas market for households is unavailable in Ukraine, and this is not because of Resolution 20, it is about Resolution 758. Naftogaz of Ukraine is imposed obligations, and it sets the threshold price for gas. This is 4,900 hryvnias for gas as commodities. Also transportation, supply, and VAT are included. Let's look into gas market resource. The price for this group of individuals is not higher than 6,400 hryvnias, taking into account that individuals they consume small amounts. The cost of administering is high, so the cost would be higher than 6,500. Gas market is non-available because of economic factors. the market price and the threshold price for supply of gas to individuals, they differ. What would happen if special obligations are lifted from Naftogaz of Ukraine? The price would equalize, it level up at the market level, it will become higher. We should take account the influence on final consumers due to increase in prices, whether it is subsidy or not. I would like to say that Ukraine has 50% of households which pay for gas themselves. Why gas suppliers do not come to them and do not have direct settlements with them by they use live money? The answer is in the plane of competition. This is the background concerning clearing system, but in prospects we are for abandoning clearing scheme. This mechanism is not market oriented. Then returning to the matter of subsidies, I agree with Yana. Our position is what concerns real problem which we see now. The first is lack of efficient system of preventive mechanisms which can prevent fraud in this segment, and detecting it in the process of subsidy system operation, the so-called dead souls, then understating the income, veiling the income. The next stage of monetization is we can't start monetization before addressing these fraud issues, because when we monetize subsidies, the motivation to conduct fraud would increase even more. If you remember how standards were reduced, gas and heating takes 90% share of all subsidies. The gas standards were 11 meters, cubic meters, then they were reduced to 7 and now they are 5. This is twice, this is half of previous standard. According to national regulator, in the segment of households having houses up to 1,020 square meters, the consumption was 4 cubic meters per month during the season. In the heating season, the graph of consumption is like a dome, because in January and February, consumption of gas is very high. So inefficient use of funds is observed at the beginning and at the end of the heating period. This complicates the situation with monitoring of gas consumption. The problem also is in the segment of multi-apartment houses. According to our estimates, we have 65% of buildings equipped with heat meters. Main subsidies goes for heating bills covering. We can see here more of a problem with district heating companies which supply heat to multi-apartment houses. This is what about subsidies and standards of consumption. The matter is in relationship between standards for different energy resources. We have standards for water, gas and heating. The difference is 1.5-fold. We have these differences between water and heat and electricity standards. Last but not the least important, I would like to say about writing off 15 billions. The matter is not the amount of this money, very huge amount, 15 billion. The point is in actions of government and communication, public awareness campaign. The population thought that they will carry forward this money, but only 100 cubic meters were left as of the beginning of September on their individual accounts because overpayments were equal to thousands and dozens of thousands. This problem is not of energy sector. This problem is in the plane of socio energy. People will not trust in government and its steps. As concerns monetization, we are for it, of course, but monetization should start after the problems which I mentioned have been resolved. Monetization should be a two-stage process. First, part monetization, when services consumed are paid for according to changed standards with transfer to full monetization. As concerns this partial model of monetization and those residues which a person has as of the end of heating season, we are for voluntary disposal of this residue by households. We are for energy efficiency measures, but we see the other way of promoting energy efficiency via reduction of social standards at some horizon, such as 5 years, a midterm. Social standard will be phase by phase reduced. Consumer will see and will plan its action, and he will introduce energy efficiency measures. But this group of consumers divides into groups. Some group of people has measures already completed, and the other consumer may have other priorities. It concerns elderly people. They do not have such long horizons, planning horizons. They believe in our state the least of all citizens, and they will have better attitude, the best attitude among all consumers to monetization of subsidies. As concerns linking monetization with the system of subsidies in general and launch of energy efficiency measures, I have not over-evaluated the links between these measures which I mentioned. That is the controversy. The goal of social protection is to provide financial assistance and optimize costs via social standards at some certain level. The standards should be high to have more residues. This is the controversy which I think can be resolved in the current model, and we should depart from it. The system of subsidies, this is social welfare. It should be separate thing, and it should cover the needy ones, and the expenditures from the budget should be streamlined to establish the energy efficiency fund on the basis of subsidies system, as was told today. This is not viable in long-term perspective, and it is not an optimum one. As concerns measures which should be launched, they are verification of recipients of subsidies by incomes, debt souls, and so on. Reduction of social standards, launching at the first stage an aggregated system of metering of actual consumption of energy, then shifting to personalized metering, bottom up, which allows to check whether this resource was consumed, because this is the space for fraud, and this is not our competence. This is licensing body responsibility, which previously it was the financial inspectorate. What obstacles we see today? The main obstacle is weakness in most regions, at the bottom level, at the grassroots of social welfare departments, in the plane of motivation to efficient performance, in terms of business processes, IT technologies. Most regions, they have critical condition, and as concerns, they calculate in Excel. But in some region, IT systems and analytical platforms are very sound, so best practice from one region, they could be replicated in other regions. So as concerns conceptual things, I told you about cosmetic steps, small steps. But there are some conceptual things also today. The attention to subsidies is focused on recipients of subsidies, whether they have enough money, whether subsidies are enough. Let's set plan not 8 million but 15 million for subsidies, but recipients of subsidies are out of the focus of attention. The subsidies, they are funded from the budget of the country. Here should be balance of interest, those who pay and those who are recipients of subsidies. This concerns social protection in the context of subsidies. My personal opinion is that current system of subsidies is unfair with respect to those consumers who does not have access to all communal services. Kyiv resident has access to district heating, water supply, and many other services, while a village resident has access to electricity and may have no access to all other services. So the one who has access to the larger number of services receives higher assistance, higher support than those residents who does not have access to services. All citizens should have equal access to all services. In the world, such systems has been tested and proved they are conceptual things which I am concerned with.
Дякую.
Thank you, Oleksiy, for this analysis. And I agree with you that this reform needs proper steps that would allow to see this social component better. And we can say that there should be some transition period. And we should continue with the social program. And the news from the Ministry of Finance, the changes were introduced into the state budget, and the subsidy for the next year will be 240 million hryvnias as to the estimates. And in the press there were some figures, pessimistic scenario, that subsidies can reach 70 or 80 billion hryvnias. And I give the floor to Marianna Onufryk, who is going to tell us about monetization of subsidies as a responsibility of the state before its citizens and international partners. Thank you. We thank the Ministry of Finance and Naftogaz for their deep understanding of the role of the social component in provision of these subsidies. So, subsidy, first of all, is the system of social protection of citizens. And the most important is citizen, and when person completes these forms and apply for subsidies, and these subsidies, they are allocated through the system, and we can speak about it a lot. But whether the system is an effective instrument of social protection, it raises concern. Starting with the fact that subsidy protects not poor people, and not all poor people apply for subsidy. And even if you look the recent surveys, the UNDP says that 13% of those who get subsidies can be considered as poor. And the Prime Minister Groisman said in April, at the end of hearing season, that 25% of those who get subsidies are considered to be poor. And the subsidy didn't properly implement in functions because of objective and subjective reasons. And also, only partly we mentioned provision 848, and our government is proud that they simplified the rules for applying for the subsidy. Only profits are taken into account, and the only limitation, the person for getting the subsidy is buying for more than 500,000 hryvnias, and assets of the person are not taken into account. Property is not taken into account. The number of cars, yachts, lifestyle is not included in the assessment. Deposits are not included, and the profits from these revenues from these deposits are not included. So subjective conditions for the for getting the subsidies. And here there is an interesting situation. A lot of citizens, they abuse the system, and there are some trends when people, in order to meet those requirements to get these subsidies, the profit they got from during the year, they try to not to show these profits. People addressed the employers with the request to pay salaries in envelopes to meet the criteria to get these subsidies. And there are requests to state employment service. People try to get registered as unemployed, but they have job in order to show that they have some wish. They are formally registered somewhere, and they get minimal payment in order to get the subsidies. So the system of subsidy distorts behavior of consumers and deepens the crisis in the areas that are adjacent to the area of subsidies. How can we solve this problem? First, we should discuss this. The first step was made by recently by 300, and you know that the minimal wage will be raised, and during this heating season nothing will happen, but in October 2017 a part of subsidy, those people who get subsidies, their level of profit won't allow them to get these subsidies. When we're speaking about social justice, we should bring this up to the standards, and you know that 1,600 hryvnias is not an adequate cost of living for one person per month. If we are speaking, for example, about Kyiv, and the situation is like this, that citizens, they lie about their profits, and government lies to the citizens about the minimal wage. So we should go from both sides. So government should establish proper level of minimal wage, and it should they should say that they can or they cannot meet these requirements. And as previous speaker said, that there should be proper measures of verification and introduction of the system that meets testing, not only to calculate through direct indicators, for example, ID code, passport, and formal documents about profits and revenues. There should be clear criteria established. For example, in France, you cannot apply for subsidy if you have housing in your ownership. If you have real estate, if you live in a flat and you own it, you cannot apply for subsidy. Otherwise, you should conclude some contract, and it is we shouldn't introduce such tough measures, but we should limit the number of people who get the subsidies, and there should be proper testing for getting the subsidy. Also about our obligations, our international obligations. In the current memorandum signed on 1st of September, a lot of attention has been paid to subsidies. Until end of September this year, we had a structural indicator and that will be considered for obtaining next tranche of IMF, and it was about formula of providing subsidy, and also not only a structural benchmark for functioning of the centralized system that would allow to reveal those abusers, violators of the system, and verify. And also concerning Naftogaz, where in the division about the measures to remove the deficit. It is said that till 2017 we will monetize subsidies, and the subsidies should be monetized. And on the whole, I like the position of the Ministry of Finance and the scenarios mentioned by Yana. This is the best option with all those stages in order to verify the behavior of consumers after full or partial monetization. We should first implement some pilot project in this area. Thank you, Marianna. So now we start Q&A session, and I would like to ask first question. All we know that we have also subsidies for buying solid fuel, and as I know, this program is fully monetized, so the consumers can decide for what they will spend their money and whether they want to modernize the system or just buy some fuel. So 800 million hryvnias was allocated this year, and this year, for the next year, they allocated 2.4 million hryvnias. So this is a social program. And what about lessons learned from this program? Speaking about risks of monetization of the subsidies on household services. So is this experience considered? Is it taken into account? I understand that this experience was not taken into account. Any experience will be considered when there will be a proper final model. So this is really a small share of the task. That's why it cannot be used as a model for copying. Thank you. I will give the floor to our audience. Do you have questions? Please ask. Roman? The minimal level of provision of these services, that was the question about the minimum package of energy services. It's not a secret that we have such packages, minimal packages. There was a renewed, updated version. For example, 21 square meter per person, for some 6 cubic meters of gas per person. So considering what was mentioned, that people have different access to these services, do you believe that such minimum package is adequate? Is it enough? And how it should really look, ideally? Thank you, Roman, for your question. Those indicators that you've mentioned, these are the indicators that are included in provision 209 on social norms and concerning square meters and of housing, and also the services provided. And the matter is the model of this, the structure of and provision 848 envisages that you have the right. If you have the right for the service, you have the right to apply for subsidy. And then your profit, your revenue will be taken into account while considering whether you really have the right to get subsidy. Ideally, I believe that all the services, I won't say about water because I'm not expert on this, but concerning heating, in my opinion, there should be an amount of energy units that are there should be
нормах там 18 градусів.
18 degrees Celsius. If you have some and energy mix should be taken into account, electricity energy, then gas or solid fuel in proportions that exist in the market. It should be calculated and the sum should be made equivalent to the cost of the whole energy package. And this energy package should be allocated only to those people who objectively have the right for getting this in the form of money.
Ну, тоді, користуючись нагодою, ще задам.
So, using this opportunity, I would like to ask one more question. I would like to know your assessment. So, if we are speaking about separately social sphere and energy efficiency, what will be the real number of people who really needs who really need the subsidy? Do you have such calculations? I won't tell you about calculations, but maybe we should properly assess this. And today, 50 up to 60% of salaries are in the shadow economy, and this amount of people, they apply for subsidies. And I asked my colleagues from Energy Efficiency Office, and he said that according to their data, less than 45% of those people who took this warm credits, they are they get subsidies. But those people who do not have this, they are more active in this area. And if we are speaking about the change of the formula that is stated in the memorandum IMF, and speaking about formulas and the minimal wage and all those social norms we're speaking about, we hope that we won't get outside the figures we are in, because these are obligations before IMF, and you said that that there are 47 billion, and in current memorandum there is such statement that we do not have the right to go outside 35 billion sum. 47 billion for 2017, and for 2017 there is no benchmark, such benchmark as 35 billion. This is not the benchmark for 2017. Thank you for your comment. And I give the floor to the regional to our regional centers via Skype. Seversky Donetsk. We are for monetizing these subsidies because we believe that monopolies are supported, oligarchs are supported by subsidies that exist today. Do you believe that oligarchs and monopolies will prevent this monetization, monetizing of the subsidies?
Чи буде спротив?
Чи буде спротив?
І як його подолати?
maybe there will be opposition from monopolies. Maybe Oleksiy will tell us from all monopolists. Naftogaz is not a monopoly in classic understanding that is presented by Anti-Monopoly Committee. And
Монополіст, якщо залишити поточну...
if we have monetization, the monopoly won't suffer if you take care of all these monopolies. And we speak about precondition to this monetization. We should optimize the norms. We should reveal those who cannot apply for subsidies. So I believe that monopolies and oligarchs, they want to cement the system that is now, and that the current system stimulates people to overconsumption, and as end result, the money is provided to the service provider. And I would like to mention the argument of my speech, and there should be optimization of interests of society, those who pay taxes and those who get taxes. And we should take into account the interests of service providers, of course, because we cannot destroy monopolies. This is an error, because there are natural monopolies and you cannot get rid of them. This is connected with infrastructure, electricity networks, gas pipelines, heating supply. So there is a distorted understanding. People believe that if they disconnect from central heating supply, you will be free. No, you just will get to another monopolist, to electricity supplier or gas supplier. That's why you shouldn't have illusions and fight some windmills. You should find balance of interest among all stakeholders, both the consumers and suppliers, all the participants of the market. Do you have other comments, please? A brief comment. I agree with Oleksiy that monopolies are natural, and whether there will be opposition. So this monetization, this is the rejection of clearing, and the enterprises that do not want to manipulate. This is good, because to participate in clearing, in clearance, there's a signing of protocols, and going to those people who should sign these protocols, and a lot of discussions with those people. And those who use these opportunities presented by this inefficient system with increased norms, yes, they will be against, they will oppose. So what? Thank you. Next question.
We have a question from Mykolaiv. Good afternoon. You're welcome. Yes, we hear you well. Ask your question. Good afternoon. We can hear you. My question is, what is the main goal of monetization of subsidies, and what benefits will the stakeholders and the state have? Well, the main goal of subsidies, what consumers will get and what will be the benefits of the state. So in this win-win situation, so that we do not work into the game with the zero sum. In my opinion, the main goal the final goal is not to lose the sense of reform. Social function should remain in place for those who is in need of this social protection, and to cut off all those persons who are not eligible for social protection, for social welfare. Social function is the main function of subsidies, but I can't agree with that we should divide energy efficiency and subsidies into separate things, and not to take energy efficiency when we look into the matter of subsidies, when the country residential sector consumes 2.5-fold energy than other European countries. In such a country, these matters, the energy efficiency and subsidies, are very interconnected. So why not the state to support and to promote energy efficiency standards? They are an element of social support, but they should be reduced in order to promote energy efficiency. If we are talking about the social function, that this is the only one important function, then we will just leave. We should shift to actual consumption amount. I agree as well that there is a direct connection between social sphere and energy efficiency. Talking about the subsidy, this is in the first term the mechanism of social protection, social welfare, and an individual should be motivated to save resources. When this monetization instrument is provided to an individual, the state can propose different programs and reduce standards, but only an individual himself or herself can realize all these tools and programs. I would like to specify. I would like to explain what is the primary and what is the secondary. The primary is social protection and streamlining of expenditure, optimizing of expenditures. This would promote savings, not energy efficiency. First, behavioral changes will be promoted, but those money which will be received via optimization of social standards, they will not be enough to launch wide-scale thermal modernization, especially in those groups of consumers who will remain after such optimization, who have other priorities and other planning horizons. Only those people who are in need, they should receive subsidies, in particular disabled persons and elderly persons and other low-income groups. Thank you, dear speakers, to your answers. Then maybe just one final question from the audience. May we ask, we have a proposal. Severodonetsk is ready to become a pilot city for monetization of subsidies for households. We are ready to consider. Well, Kalush have already promised you will be the second. Okay, this is wonderful. First Kalush and we will be the second. Well, this is to the Ministry of Finance to to take note of. Well, that's all. If we do not have any questions, the third panel is closed. Thank you very much to our speakers, our audience, and our online audience.